Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in this Decline Decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better. And today the things getting better appears to come round remarkably quickly. Everything I'm going through today effectively happened over the past 3 or 4 days. Aside from this first tweet, though this was the tweet that set it all off because people are quite confused as to why this is in the news at all. Well, all the events of this video stem from this tweet and column by Fraser Nelson, Britain, the Case for Optimism. And he titled this, well, the editor of The Telegraph titled this, Britain's Integration Miracle is a Beacon of Hope Amid Instability. Now, I'm not going to bother going through the article because all you really need to know from this is that Fraser Nelson was editor of The Spectator, and his personal anecdotal experience with multiculturalism is hiring a load of journalists from around the world, or with different origins, to work under him at The Spectator. He gets on with them all, and this is his vision of multiculturalism. And while he does admit that there have been problems with multiculturalism, because Fraser Nelson happens to live in a fairly nice part of London and work in a fairly nice part of London as well, he doesn't have the, let's call it, working class experience of multiculturalism, which is why he makes it his flagship, effectively. Now, Fraser Nelson is a good journalist. This is just a pretty bad blind spot for him. But obviously trying to say that multiculturalism has been a success is only going to lead in one direction, especially on today's Twitter. Well, with backs and forths on Twitter about this article, Twitter Anons obviously started talking about the grooming gangs again, and Wolf of Clapham put out a tweet on December 30th saying people should have hung for Rotherham. Obviously he means hangs there, but Max Tempers, who I have to say, if there is anyone on Twitter that you must follow, Max Tempers is the account I would say that you should follow. Me as well, obviously, I'm great, but Max Tempers actually does really good research and puts it up in big old Twitter threads that are very much worth reading. And in this one he says the grooming gang's trial summary transcripts are utterly grotesque. It's incredible we haven't had mass civil unrest, and obviously I am massively against mass civil unrest. I do not want to see violence in the streets. Media reporting guidelines help bottle it up. Some of these people are going to walk free soon. And I would read out this transcript, but I'm not going to lie, it is grotesque. It describes absolutely horrific detail about the rape of a poor teenage girl, by multiple men, by the way, and how she was branded. That's about as much as I'm going to say about that. And the rest of the transcript isn't much better. The girl's parents were manipulated. These men are just pure evil. We know this. I've covered this before. But if you want to find the details of this for yourself, don't worry, there will be other tweets that you can go through that are down in the description. Anyway, these problems were amplified by others, and then leftist Joshua Naiko said dozens of towns that bear the scars of Pakistani grooming gangs, writes Simon Bidwell in this long post. There may well indeed be dozens, but can Bidwell name 24 plus British towns where grooming gangs operated, and in every case justify it is accurate to label them as Pakistani gangs? Which I think is possibly the worst thing you can ask in this case, because we have way more than 24. And then when GB News' own Charlie Peters says he's found over 50, Joshua replies, "Are you called Sam Bidwell?" which just goes to show how seriously the left take this issue. Because off the top of his head, Sam Bidwell managed to name 20 towns, and it really wasn't difficult for other people to add to this list in the replies. Anyway, under this tweet, Elon Musk put 2 exclamation marks, which is how Musk ended up getting onto this subject as well. But before we jump into Elon Musk's take on these subjects, I think it's first important to actually go through, again, just some of the details from this entire case. Because I really hate to say it, and I've done this before, I have gone through what some of the crimes that were committed to these poor girls actually were. And it's one of those things that you just try and forget about because it is that heinous. And I genuinely think it would be very wrong of me to at least not go through some of the details, maybe not necessarily reading it out word for word, of what actually happened to these poor girls, because this is genuinely the biggest scandal I think Britain, the British institutions, the police, political class, have ever gone through. And while there have been inquiries and while some grooming gang members have been put in prison, the system still isn't working as it should. This is still going on to some extent. And a lot of it was buried, and a lot of it was obfuscated from the public, as was mentioned before. Publishing editorial guidelines for newspapers effectively forced them to not be able to actually publish full details of this. I would imagine mainly because I imagine their main excuse would be they don't want violence on the streets. Well, frankly, if you don't do your job as the police, of course there's going to be some vigilante police work on the streets. So Sam Ashworth-Hayes of The Telegraph has been coming out with some of his own details of what these poor women had to go through. It's worth remembering that when cases came to the attention of authorities, they leapt into action. They buried them in case, investigating inflamed racial tensions, and maintaining the lie that everything was fine was more important than children's safety. And he has a snippet of an article. A senior police officer admitted that his force ignored the sexual abuse of girls by Pakistani grooming gangs for decades because it was afraid of increasing racial tensions and watchdogs had ruled. After a 5-year investigation, the Independent Office for Police Conduct upheld a complaint that the Rotherham officer told a missing child's distraught father that the town would erupt if it was known that Asian men were routinely having sex with underage white girls. There's just no excuse for this. I mean, as I say, I've gone through this before. You'll know my position on this. I don't want to dwell on this too long. I don't want to make this about me. This is absolutely atrocious for the girls, and this is not even the worst example. And Hayes went on this for days. This happened the day after, on the 31st of December. What happened if you went to the police for help about this, where you got told to shut up? The report revealed that in one instance, the father of a 15-year-old suspected rape victim was told by an officer it would teach her a lesson. The attack was so brutal the teenager needed surgery afterwards. It doesn't tell you where, but if it's the story I'm thinking of, it was internal surgery, I'll say that much. In another case, the report found one parent concerned about a missing daughter and was told by an officer it was a fashion accessory for girls in Rotherham to have an older Asian boyfriend and that she would grow out of it. This wasn't taken seriously at all. These poor girls had to go through years, decades in some cases, of abuse, and nothing was done about it, and people wonder why no one takes the police seriously in this country. And it's a thing I always wondered, why was there nothing really done by the parents here? Well, it turns out that if there wasn't anything done, it's because they were manipulated, or they weren't present at all in some cases, or if they were and wanted something done about it, well, yeah, the police would just tell them to go away. Shut up. We've got to make sure that racial tensions aren't inflamed. Why is this? Well, it's because of the Race Relations Act 1965 and every other woke racial equality act that came after that. Do I want racial equality? Well, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. If it results in this, though, well, I'm going to start questioning if the acts are fit for purpose, I'll put it that way. Anyway, Mr. Ashworth-Hayes wasn't done yet. This was New Year's Day. Parents who attempted to rescue their children were arrested when the police arrived. We read a case where, or cases, sorry, more than one, where a child was doused in petrol and threatened with being set alight. Children who were threatened with guns, children who witnessed brutally violent rapes and were threatened that they would be the next victim if they told anyone. Girls as young as 11 were raped by large numbers of male perpetrators, one after the other. I do find it difficult to read these, but it must be done. In 2 of the cases we read, fathers tracked down their daughters and tried to remove them from the houses where they were being abused, only to be arrested themselves when police were called to the scene. In a small number of cases, which have already received media attention, the victims were arrested for offences such as breach of the peace or being drunk and disorderly, with no action taken against the perpetrators of rape and sexual assault against children. Again, I can say it a million times, why is anyone at a loss for why there is no trust in public institutions? This stuff was buried. People put their head in the sand like ostriches over this, frankly, because I think it will be too painful for them all to realise just how evil they are. It is evil to allow this to continue as it has when you had the power to stop it. But this is the point where Elon Musk started to chime in on all this horrific news. So many people at all levels of power in the UK need to be in prison for this, and as you can see, this was seen by nearly 40 million people at time of recording, just a day after he posted it. It's got 172,000 likes, many retweets as well. This is something that will have obviously made it to the ears of Mr. Starmer, who is of course on holiday at the moment, because he deserves it for managing to ruin the UK even more than the Tories managed it. But there were officials who retweeted Elon Musk here to effectively signal boost their own anecdotes of this whole sorry affair. Simon Danzuk said, "Senior Labour politicians warned me not to mention the ethnicity of the perpetrators for fear of losing votes when I tried shining a light on the Rochdale grooming gangs issue." And there's plenty of anecdotes like this. We've seen it in the inquiries. Has anything changed? No, it hasn't. And so I implore this man, along with everyone else in his comments, please do just name the people. Please name them. We need to name and shame these people. Because, frankly, we should not allow anyone near any sort of power who was willing to bury this. And it won't be enough to say don't vote Labour for this, because people will just... They will think, oh, there's no way it could be all of Labour, which, to be honest, it probably wasn't all of Labour. But if you can target people, especially if they're high up in the Labour Party, target Labour candidates who are complicit in this, that would be a lot more effective. But I wouldn't be shocked if there's a gagging order here. And in fact, Mr. Hayes had even more reports on Simon's anecdote effectively being completely true. Just look at what happened when Labour Shadow Minister wrote about grooming gangs years after they were already out in the open. A brutal backlash, an apology and a resignation. The rule is simple. You can't talk about it. Labour Shadow Minister Sarah Champion has quit the party's front bench after criticism over a newspaper article she wrote about grooming gangs. The Rotherham MP, and Rotherham is probably the biggest story about these gangs, wrote in The Sun on Friday that Britain has a problem with British Pakistani men raping and exploiting white girls. She has now apologised for her extremely poor choice of words and quit as Shadow Equities Minister. Jeremy Corbyn said Labour would not demonise any particular group, apart from, of course, the fact that they had to be investigated for demonising Jews, but, well, that's all in the past, thanks to Mr. Starmer. But to finish off Mr. Ashworth Hayes' tweets, he put the worst one out today, just a few hours ago. When a child in Bradford married, quote-unquote, her abuser in a traditional Islamic wedding, her social worker attended the ceremony. The council then arranged for the girl to be fostered by his parents, and the details are here. It was while she was still living in the residential placements that Anna began to wear full Muslim dress, adopted a Muslim name, and told the child services that she had been married to the adult male boyfriend in a nikah ceremony. Nikah is a Muslim wedding at which the bride does not have to be present, as long as she sends 2 witnesses to the drawn-up agreement. She was age 15 at the time. By the way, that's illegal. You are not allowed to marry anyone under the age of 16, but obviously this is an Islamic ceremony, not anything to do with the state, so they probably weren't done for it. The willingness of some professionals to legitimise this wedding is clear from the agency records. The adult male was thereafter referred to by professionals as her husband and his parents as her mother and father-in-law. The nikah marriage, far from being challenged and perceived as coercive or exploitative, was accepted, and Anna's social worker at the time attended the ceremony. What do you do about this? Honestly, this is how rotten to the core British institutions are. And again, who are the people who defend these institutions? Oh, left-wingers. What a shock. The decision to consider and approve a fostering placement with the adult male's parents is difficult to understand. The adult male was her abuser. It was also clear that she was not regarded with respect and affection by her husband's family. In fact, they were also controlling and abusing. Yeah, no duh. Again, it seems that the rot is at every level of the British institutions. There was a reason Reform chose their name. They are planning to reform every single part of Britain because it is rotten to the core. Well, at this point, it is clear that the topic of grooming gangs was all over Twitter, in the mainstream areas of it, and of course the alternative areas of Twitter as well. It was a hot button topic. Quite a few people were confused about why it came about. I hope I've gone through that for you now. And not only that, the details that were posted there were simply just horrific. And thankfully, an awful lot of these details were being retweeted and commented on by Reform, with basically nothing being said, at least that I can find, by any major Labour MP. Robert Jenrick, who would have made a much better Tory leader than Kemi Badenoch, had his own opinions on this. As a father of girls of the same age, it's hard to comprehend the evil of grooming gang perpetrators laid bare in the sentencing remarks, and it's the one from Max Tempers before, because Max Tempers manages to get these quotes and these stories to the mainstream quite well. I will continue to campaign for whole life sentences and for the prosecution of all those who covered it up. Which, personally, I think is a good start. But I think we are getting to the point where further punishment is becoming more popular for, people who committed these crimes. But nevertheless, this was a comment made on New Year's Day as the height of this subject was reaching its peak. It's good stuff. I'm happy with it. Kemi Badenoch, after being very late into this subject, only commenting on it this morning despite the fact it peaked over New Year's, the time is long overdue for a full national inquiry into rape gang scandal. At least you called it rape gangs, I suppose. Trials have taken place all over the country in recent years, but no one in authority has joined the dots. 2025 must be the year that victims start to get justice. I think it's worth bearing in mind at this point that Kemi Badenoch was in the Tory cabinet for years. I'm talking years, even as a junior minister. Yeah, for 5 years she has been in the cabinet, either as a junior minister or obviously she ended up as Secretary for International Trade and then as Business Secretary. Okay, it's not exactly her wheelhouse to have an inquiry into the grooming scandal, but either way, you are in these cabinet meetings. Problem is, in cabinet meetings, they're all NPCs, they're all given a script to read off, and that's probably what she did. Kemi Badenoch, unironically, is an NPC who's managed to get to the position she is in. Do I hate to say it? No, I think I'm open about saying it at this point. She is effectively the Tory version of a DEI hire. And what's the issue with DEI hires? Well, they're effectively useless. And okay, it's not that I necessarily disagree with this, but the issue is that it was said very late on into this subject even coming up. It's an open goal for, as we will go through, people to say, well, why didn't you do anything then? And then the invariable question after that is, why aren't you being punished if you were in office as a minister not doing anything about this? And Sammy Woodhouse, who is actually a survivor of these gangs, replied to us saying, I've met with your party for 12 years about this, when you were in power. I asked for an inquiry into every town and city, but none of you cared. Now you need a vote you want to speak on it. Again, just a complete open goal. If you're going to talk about this, Kemi, unfortunately, you have to be effectively begging us to forgive you for not doing anything about it. Because, as I say, it's just an open door to questions like this. And Nigel Farage says a similar thing. Talk is cheap. The Tories had 14 years in government to launch an inquiry. The establishment has failed the victims of grooming gang on every level. And as you can see from the screenshot, there were some people asking, well, what exactly would Reform do differently? To which I would say to these people, please just at least have a skim through their contract, because you are more than likely to find your answers there. And as Matt Goodwin says, well, Reform were the only political party who actually had anything about this in their manifesto, or, well, contract, in Reform's case. Stop child grooming gangs, deport offenders holding dual citizenship, make child grooming an aggravated offence, improve safeguarding of victims and the vulnerable, and no bail for grooming gang offenders. So, yeah, that's their plan. If you have dual citizenship, you get your citizenship in Britain taken off you get deported then, obviously. The offence is going to be even worse, so it's probably going to be pretty much guaranteed whole life sentences for being involved in this. The victims aren't going to feel like they're left behind anymore. That's what everyone wants. And again, no bail for grooming gang offenders. Great. Good stuff. They should not be let out. Because it's a famous story that Carl Benjamin always brings up, that there was a woman, and I can't remember which town she was in, but she was a victim of these grooming gangs, and then after 10 years of one of the main abusers being put in jail, she just randomly saw him free on the streets in an Asda or something and had a panic attack. It's like, obviously these people should either be in prison forever or deported and never allowed back. And there is a third option there, but, well, I want to keep this YouTube friendly. I think it's too late for that, but I'm still going to try. And of course, everyone's favourite MP, Rupert Lowe, expands on this. We should also be ferociously pushing to deport family members of these men who are aware of the heinous crime of their husbands, fathers and brothers and sons, while being committed on young British girls. They knew about it and did nothing. Out. Gone. Deported. Never allowed back. Perfect stuff. And, well, some Anon replied, the whole community in those areas would have been aware. To which Rupert Lowe just says, then so be it. Which is the type of tweets that I think should be framed and put into every history book, assuming Reform win and actually do this. Because, yes, it's probably going to be difficult, but this is probably necessary at this point. This is such a huge scandal and caused such pain and misery and injustice to so many British girls, families, and wider communities that it is almost a crime against humanity. And having basically done nothing about it, well, not nothing. Some of the gang members are in jail now, obviously, but obviously having covered it up and tried to hide it, basically everyone involved in that at any level, yes, probably should be in jail for a long time, if not forever. But it appears even Reform's paper candidate, James McMurdoch, had things to say about this, and he asks, what would you infer from this? And in the first one, it's a headline saying, Labour launch a new review every 2.5 days. So obviously They are just absolutely in love with their reviews. And then the second picture, Labour rejects Oldham's call for government inquiry into grooming gang scandal. So while they are happy to review absolutely everything about the last 14 years of Tory rule, they are not willing to look into why the scandal with the grooming gangs was hidden. So yeah, what are you supposed to infer from this? Well, I leave that to you, my lovely audience. Anyway, while all this was going on, Elon Musk once again was bringing this all to the forefront, because whatever Elon says, pretty much everyone else follows, given he owns the damn platform and given that he is, frankly, quite funny. But he made this tweet saying only reform can save Britain, which, I'm not going to lie, is probably actually going to do massive wonders for reform. Once again, it's signal boosting them, and once again, they're in conversation sometimes publicly on Twitter, and it's quite clear that they have the same opinions, that grooming gangs should probably be ended by pretty much any means necessary. Elon also started saying free Tommy Robinson due to the fact that Tommy Robinson's kind of the lightning rod for this topic, especially for a lot of people over in America, because obviously they keep an eye on our alternative media more than our mainstream media for very obvious reasons, I'd say. So again, another signal boost, but I think it would be wiser for Elon Musk to try and keep it on topic of, oh my god, isn't this awful, and keep having a go at Labour, which luckily he did, by saying in the UK serious crimes such as rape require the Crown Prosecution Service's approval for the police to charge suspects. Well, who was head of the CPS when rape gangs were allowed to exploit young girls without facing justice? Keir Starmer from 2008 to 2013. And obviously, as shown before, there is no inquiry going to be put onto Oldham for their grooming gang scandal. It was a choice made by Jess Phillips, but we'll get into that in a sec. Who is the boss of Jess Phillips, though? Right now it's Keir Starmer. The real reason she's refusing to investigate the rape gangs is that it would obviously lead to blaming Keir Starmer, head of the CPS at the time, along with an awful lot of other members of the Labour Party. And this is good pressure to keep up, especially when it comes out from Charlie Peters that Labour have rejected Oldham's council request for government inquiry into grooming gangs, and the GB News has seen a letter from the Safeguarding Minister Jess Phillips urging councils to organise their own inquiry. Jess Phillips says that she understands the strength of feeling but rejected calls for a government-led review. She also apologised for the delay in responding to 2 letters from the council executives. Just to be very specific on what Jess Phillips' job is at the moment, it is Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for Safeguarding and Violence Against Women and Girls. In other words, it is literally her job to protect women and girls from violence. And apparently she is not for an inquiry into said violence against women and girls. Believe it or not, there's also a tweet that goes with this. And this definitely won't be her only one, but one that stuck out to everyone on Twitter was Jess Phillips tweeting, "Next time any government minister tells you that violence against women and girls is a priority for them, don't believe them. It isn't, they literally don't give a toss." Because being crass is apparently needed to be a Labour MP these days. And this, by the way, was directly quote-tweeting about the Tories under Rishi Sunak not being able to find 150 new judges quick enough to get rape cases through to the courts. So yeah, I think we should use Jess Phillips' own advice against her when she is clearly not serious about these cases and doing an inquiry on exactly how violence against women and girls was covered up and even perpetrated. And allowed, frankly. Anyway, as usual with these sorts of things, we're having a go at Labour, but really the Tories are worse when it comes to this sort of thing. In reply to an Oldham councillor asking for an inquiry into the grooming gangs in their area, after apologising for delaying in replying to his request, Amanda Soloway, the Minister for Safeguarding Against Violence Against Women and Girls, said, "I share your concerns over the shameful failures over child sexual exploitation in Oldham. As so shockingly detailed in the recent report, children were failed time and again by those who should have protected them, including Oldham Council and Greater Manchester Police. We are determined that this must never happen again. The Home Secretary has been consistently clear that this government expects the police and local authorities to relentlessly pursue perpetrators and protect children from this disgusting crime." Great stuff. Did it happen? Yeah, kinda. In relation to your request that the government institute a public inquiry into the findings of the Newsham and Ridgeway reports, the government continues to be clear that it is for the local authorities in individual towns and cities which are responsible for delivering local services to commission local inquiries. It is essential that local areas learn from what's happened in the past and take appropriate action to drive improvement in local services. In other words, Tories are just as bad, if not worse, because this was apparently a consistent line, that the government shouldn't lead any inquiry onto local councils, despite the fact that this is a multi-council issue, and obviously went further than the power of councils. Again, this is probably why they don't want to do it, because it is going to make the civil service, it is going to make Labour Party staffers, officials, police crime commissioners, people at all sorts of levels of the institutions. Effectively, it's going to put them in jail, I would imagine. And the Tories, maybe not the Tories themselves, but there will be some Tories also complicit in this as well. This is rot that goes from top to bottom. Pretty much everyone knows this now. It's been said in inquiries. Has anything happened to them? Of course it hasn't. That's why they don't want another one. And the councils obviously can only have their report go so high, only to the council level. Obviously, if the government leads it, it goes all the way to the top. And my God, they do not want that to happen. And well, with that information under your belt, I think you can completely understand why I am never trusting either of the mainstream parties again. Do what Elon Musk says, vote reform. That is what I implore you. Anyway, I'm going to leave you with one last thread. As mentioned before, Charlie Peters is GB News' own investigative reporter who has made looking into the grooming gangs his, well, passion project, for lack of a better term. And he starts a very long thread that I implore you all go through. Britain's grooming gangs scandal is attracting attention. It's happened before, but now it seems different. I've dedicated most of my career in journalism to covering it, not covering it up, but actually covering the details of the court case and things like that, because it's the most appalling atrocity in modern British history. In this thread, I'll tell you what I know about the crisis, what I've uncovered, and what is yet to be revealed. And I will leave it there because I think you should just go over to Charlie Peters and read through his whole thing. Give him the Musk books because he obviously deserves it a lot more than I do just for reading it out for an hour. Honestly, there's some really good detail in there. It's worth going over. Go follow him. Go follow Max Tempers. Obviously, everyone involved in reform, Matt Goodwin as well. They are all excellent people to follow. And people that, as I say, are giving me white pills for the latter half of this decade. I think it's going to go very well. But it can only go well with your support. So go join Reform, canvass for them when they give you the opportunity to do so, go to their meetings, make your voice heard. You will largely be with people who are like-minded, especially if you follow this channel. But if you also want to support this channel, obviously the easiest thing to do is subscribe, the next best thing to do is become a member, and then send super chats and super thanks, all great stuff to help the channel keep going. When it comes to the schedule for the new year, so Laughing at the Guardian obviously is going to return every 2 weeks. The first one will be this Sunday, then it should be every Saturday after, on the occasional Friday as well. And then on Monday we return with the Antiquity stream, where we'll be talking about the Peloponnesian War even more, because those crazy Greeks just had history on steroids is what I'd call it. And then on Tuesday it's Tosh Talks, where we'll be going through a 2025 prediction, with our predictions put on a bingo card that we will probably scrub out every time something on that bingo card happens. But with that, that's everything I had for you for today. Sorry that it was such a heavy subject, but it really does need to be talked about. So with that, I will leave you there. Once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.